What if the person who loved you most was also the one who would destroy you? If you're ready for a story that will make you question everything about love, loyalty, and the secrets we keep, hit that like button and subscribe, because what you're about to hear will stay with you long after it's over. This is the story of three people whose lives collided in the worst possible way. A man living a double life. A woman who loved him in silence. And another woman who walked into a trap she never saw coming. And it all starts in a glass office building downtown, where nothing is quite what it seems. Clark Reynolds looked like success. At 38 years old, he had it all figured out. Designer suits. Corner office. Clients who paid top dollar for his consulting services. Reynolds Consulting occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass walls and polished chrome. Anyone walking through those doors would see a legitimate businessman at the peak of his career. And they'd be right. Partly because Clark Reynolds wasn't just running a consulting firm. He was running two businesses, and only one of them was legal. Every morning started the same way. Clark would arrive at 7, before anyone else. He'd make coffee in the pristine break room, carry it to his office, and close the door. Then he'd open his laptop and review 2 sets of books. The first showed his legitimate clients. Marketing firms. Tech startups. Local businesses that needed strategic planning and financial advice. These clients were real. The work was real. The money was modest but respectable. The second set of books told a different story. Shell corporations. Offshore accounts. Money moving through carefully constructed channels, washing itself clean with every transaction. Clark Reynolds wasn't just a consultant. He was a money launderer for organized crime. Had been for 6 years. And he was very, very good at it. He told himself the same thing every morning. Just 5 more years. 5 more years of the illegal work, saving every dollar, then he'd disappear. New identity. New country. New life. 5 more years. He'd been telling himself that for 3 years now. But the money kept coming. And Clark kept washing it. Because once you're in, getting out isn't as simple as walking away. The thing about Clark was that he didn't fit the stereotype. He wasn't flashy. Didn't drive a Ferrari or wear gold chains. His apartment was nice but not extravagant. His car was a 3-year-old sedan. He understood that the secret to surviving in his line of work was invisibility. Be successful enough to blend in with other successful people. Never draw attention. Never make waves. And never, ever let anyone get close enough to see behind the mask. Except someone already had. Vicki Lewis sat at her desk outside Clark's office, typing an email with a kind of precision that defined everything she did. At 32, she'd been Clark's executive secretary for 4 years. She managed his calendar down to the minute. Screened his calls. Handled sensitive documents with discretion. She knew which clients were legitimate and which ones weren't. She knew which phone calls Clark took in his office with the door closed and which ones he took casually at his desk. She knew everything because Vicki paid attention. She always had, especially when it came to Clark. 18 months ago, Vicki had discovered the truth by accident. She'd been filing quarterly reports when she noticed discrepancies in the accounts. Numbers that didn't match. Payments from corporations that didn't seem to exist. She'd done what any smart person would do. She dug deeper. And what she found should have sent her running to the police. Instead, she'd confronted Clark directly. That conversation lived in her memory like a scar. Clark's face when she laid the evidence on his desk. The long silence that followed. The moment when she thought he might actually hurt her to protect his secret. Then his honesty. Brutal. Direct. "You've seen the real books," he'd said, not a question. Vicki's hands had been shaking. "I won't say anything." Clark had leaned back in his chair, studying her. "Why should I believe you?" And Vicki had looked him in the eyes and told him a truth that was only partial. "Because I understand. And because I trust you." What she didn't say was the rest of it. "Because I love you. Because I've loved you since the day you hired me. Because I would do anything for you, even keep your darkest secrets." So she had. For 18 months, Vicki had been complicit in Clark's criminal enterprise. Not actively involved, but knowingly silent. And she did it for one reason: love. The kind of love that builds itself quietly over years. That notices how someone takes their coffee. That recognizes their stress tells, the way they loosen their tie when they're thinking through a problem. That memorizes their schedule and their habits and the tiny details that make them human. Vicky loved Clark with a kind of intensity that terrified her. And she'd never told him. Because she was convinced he saw her as nothing more than an employee. Efficient. Loyal. Invisible. She'd built elaborate fantasies in the quiet moments. Scenarios where he'd suddenly see her. Really see her. Where he'd realize she was exactly what he needed. Where they'd leave this criminal life together and start fresh somewhere new. Just the two of them. But fantasies were all they were. So Vicky stayed silent, stayed loyal, and stayed desperately in love with a man who didn't know she existed beyond her usefulness. Then Carmen Reed walked through the door, and everything changed. Clark had decided to expand the legitimate side of Reynolds Consulting. Better cover, he'd reasoned. More credibility. A bigger staff handling real clients meant fewer questions about the money flowing through the company. So he'd posted a job opening for a business development manager. 23 people applied. Carmen's resume stood out immediately. 29 years old. MBA from a respected university. 5 years of experience in corporate consulting. Excellent references. But it was the interview that sold Clark. Carmen was sharp. Confident without being arrogant. She asked intelligent questions about the company's vision and growth strategy. She talked about ethical business practices with genuine passion. She had integrity written all over her, which made her perfect for the legitimate side of the business, and absolutely dangerous for everything else. Clark hired her on the spot, and he told himself it was purely professional, that he needed someone with her skills and her clean reputation, that her intelligence and work ethic would be assets to the company. He told himself all of that, and he was lying. Because the truth was simpler and more complicated. Clark was attracted to Carmen. Not just physically, though she was beautiful, but to who she was. Her warmth. Her laugh. The way she talked about work like it mattered beyond money. Carmen represented everything Clark had walked away from when he'd started laundering money. Integrity. Honesty. A clean conscience. And being near her made him want to be better than he was. He asked her to lunch on her third day. Professional, he told himself. Just getting to know the new hire. But Vicky watched from her desk, and she knew better. She saw the way Clark smiled at Carmen. The way he lingered near her desk. The way his body language changed when she walked into a room. Vicky had studied Clark for 4 years. She knew every version of him. And this version, the one that laughed more and softened around the edges, this was new. This was different. This was dangerous. Carmen didn't notice at first. She was focused on learning the job, understanding the clients, proving herself in a new role. But slowly, she started responding to Clark's attention. He was charming, successful, attentive in a way that felt genuine. He asked about her life, her goals, her thoughts on everything from business strategy to her favorite books. He made her feel seen, valued. Interesting. So when he suggested dinner instead of lunch one Friday afternoon, Carmen said yes. And just like that, the line between professional and personal began to blur. Over the next few weeks, they fell into something that looked like a relationship. Coffee meetings became dinner dates. Work conversations became personal confessions. Clark opened up to Carmen in ways he hadn't with anyone in years. Carefully, of course. Nothing about the illegal business. Nothing that would put her at risk or make her complicit. But everything else. His childhood. His fears. His dreams of getting out of the consulting world eventually and starting fresh somewhere. He edited his truth, but the emotions were real. And Carmen responded with her own honesty. Her past relationships. Her family. Her hope that she'd find someone who saw her as a partner, not just a girlfriend. Someone she could build a life with. Clark fell in love. Really, truly in love. For the first time in his adult life, he wanted something more than money or safety. He wanted Carmen. Wanted a future with her. Wanted to be the man she thought he was. And that terrified him. Because the man she thought he was didn't exist. That man was a fiction. A carefully constructed lie. And Clark knew that if she ever learned the truth, she'd walk away and never look back. But Vicky saw everything. From her desk outside Clark's office, she watched the romance develop like a car crash in slow motion. She saw them leave together. Heard them laugh together. Watched Clark's face light up in ways it never had before. And something inside Vicky began to crack. She'd kept his secrets. Protected him. Loved him silently and completely for years. And he'd never once looked at her the way he looked at Carmen. Carmen, who knew nothing about who Clark really was. Carmen, who'd done nothing to earn his trust or his love. Carmen, who'd simply walked in and taken everything Vicky had wanted without even trying. The breaking point came at the company gala. Clark asked Carmen to be his official date. The whole office knew they were together now. Vicky attended alone, wearing a dress she'd bought hoping Clark might notice. He didn't. She watched them dance. Watched his hand rest on Carmen's back. Watched Carmen look up at him with open affection and trust. Watched Clark smile like a man who'd finally found what he'd been searching for. And Vicky left early, drove home, and fell apart. Because she finally understood the truth she'd been avoiding. Clark would never love her. Not in 5 years. Not ever. He'd chosen Carmen. And that choice meant Vicky had sacrificed everything for nothing. So she made a decision. If she couldn't have Clark, no one would. The question is, when love turns to poison, who really pays the price? Vicky Lewis walked into Clark's office on a Monday morning with a decision that would destroy 3 lives. She closed the door behind her, and in that moment, everything changed. "Clark, I need to tell you something." Her voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. Clark looked up from his computer, concerned. He'd noticed she'd been off lately. Missed appointments. Delayed messages. Not like her at all. "What's wrong?" he asked. Vicky took a breath. "I've been in love with you for years." The words hung in the air like smoke. Clark's face went blank. Completely blank. "I kept your secrets," Vicky continued, her voice stronger now. "Not just because I'm loyal, but because I love you. I've loved you since the beginning. And I know you're with Carmen now, but I couldn't stay silent anymore. You should know." The silence that followed felt like drowning. Clark stared at her, processing, rewinding every interaction they'd ever had through this new lens. Finally, he spoke. "Vicky, I had no idea." "I know," she said quietly. "I made sure you didn't." Clark stood up, moved around his desk. Not closer to her, but not farther away either. "You're incredible," he said carefully. "You're brilliant. Loyal. You know me better than anyone." Vicky's heart jumped. Was this it? Was he about to say what she'd dreamed of hearing? "But I don't feel that way about you." The words hit like a physical blow. "I'm sorry," Clark continued. "I care about you deeply. As a colleague. As a friend. But not romantically." Vicky forced herself to ask the question she already knew the answer to. "Is it because of Carmen?" Clark's honesty was the cruelest kindness. "No. Even if Carmen weren't in the picture, I wouldn't feel that way. I'm sorry, Vicky." And there it was. The truth she'd been avoiding for 4 years. He didn't love her. Never had. Never would. Not because of timing or circumstances or another woman. Simply because his heart didn't choose her. Vicky held herself together until she reached her desk. She sat down, stared at her computer screen, and felt something inside her shatter. Through the glass walls, she could see Clark and Carmen talking. Carmen laughed at something he said. Touched his arm. Easy. Natural. Everything Vicky had wanted but would never have. The humiliation settled in like frost. She'd confessed her love and been rejected. Gently. Respectfully. Completely. And now she had to sit at her desk every day and watch the man she loved build a life with someone else. Someone who hadn't sacrificed anything. Someone who didn't even know who Clark really was. Over the next few days, something shifted inside Vicky. Heartbreak turned to humiliation. Humiliation turned to resentment. Resentment turned to anger. She watched Carmen through the glass walls. Innocent. Happy. Completely unaware that her boyfriend was a criminal. Completely unaware that Vicky had protected Clark for 18 months while Carmen had done nothing but show up and smile. The thoughts came slowly at first, then faster. Why does she get everything? What did she do to deserve him? She doesn't even know who he really is. I kept his secrets. I was loyal when no one else was. I earned his love. And she just took it. The anger grew roots. Deepened. Spread. Until one night, sitting alone in her apartment, Vicky had a thought that felt like clarity. If I can't have him, no one will. It started as a fantasy. A way to ease the pain. What if Clark got caught? What if his criminal business was exposed? He'd lose everything. His company. His freedom. Carmen. Then Vicky would be the only one left. The only one who truly understood him. Maybe then he'd see. Maybe then he'd realize what he'd lost. But fantasies have a way of becoming plans when pain turns into rage. And Vicky was drowning in rage. Late one Thursday night, Vicky sat in a public library with a burner phone she'd bought with cash. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were sweating. But her mind was clear. She dialed the FBI's financial crimes hotline. A voice answered. Professional. Detached. Financial crimes tip line. How can I help you? Vicky's voice was calm. I have information about a money laundering operation. Reynolds Consulting downtown. Clark Reynolds is moving illegal funds through shell corporations. The operator's tone sharpened. Can you provide specifics? Vicky could. She provided dates, account numbers, transaction patterns. Everything she'd learned over 18 months of keeping Clark's secrets. The operator asked, "Do you have documentation?" "I can get it to you," Vicky said. Then she hung up. The rush she felt was intoxicating. Power, control, revenge. But in her anger and her haste, Vicky made mistakes. Fatal mistakes. She used her company email to send documents to a personal encrypted account. Deleted them, but forgot that nothing is ever truly deleted. She accessed financial files outside her normal duties. Digital footprints everywhere. And worst of all, she mentioned Carmen in her tip. His girlfriend Carmen Reed might be involved. She has access to client files. It was a lie born from jealousy. A way to hurt the woman who had everything Vicky wanted. But it was also the mistake that would unravel everything. 2 weeks later, on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, federal agents walked into Reynolds Consulting with warrants. Badges. Guns. Authority that couldn't be questioned. They seized computers. Froze accounts. Detained employees. The office erupted into chaos. People shouting. Phones ringing. No one understanding what was happening. Clark was handcuffed at his desk. Professional. Calm. Like he'd always known this day would come. Vicky was detained too. She'd expected this. Played confused. Cooperative. The perfect shocked employee. But Carmen's detention was different. Carmen had no idea what was happening. No idea why federal agents were reading her rights. No idea that her entire life was about to be destroyed. The interrogation room was cold and small. Carmen sat across from 2 agents who looked at her like she was guilty before she'd said a word. "How long have you known about the illegal operation?" the first agent asked. Carmen's confusion was genuine. Complete. "What illegal operation? I don't understand what's happening." The second agent leaned forward. "Your boyfriend is a criminal. He's been laundering money for organized crime for 6 years. The room tilted. Carmen's voice cracked. "No. That's impossible. Clark wouldn't do that." "We have evidence," the first agent said. "Financial records. Transactions. Witness testimony." Carmen felt like she was drowning. "What does this have to do with me?" The second agent's eyes were cold. "We have a tip that you're involved." "Involved in what?" Carmen's voice was rising now, panic overtaking confusion. "I manage client relationships. I do business development. That's all I do." "Very convenient that you know nothing," the first agent said. Dating the boss. Handling client files. But somehow completely unaware of millions of dollars being laundered through your company. In another room, Clark was being interrogated. He'd lawyered up immediately, but once confronted with the evidence, he didn't deny it. What was the point? They had everything. Tell us about Carmen Reed, an agent demanded. Clark's voice was firm. Final. She knows nothing. She's not involved in any of this. We have intelligence suggesting otherwise. Your intelligence is wrong, Clark said. Carmen manages the legitimate side of the business. She has no knowledge of the laundering operation. None. The agent smirked. How convenient that your girlfriend is conveniently ignorant. It's not convenient, Clark said. It's the truth. I kept her separate for exactly this reason. She's innocent. But Vicky's interrogation was different. She played her role perfectly. The shocked secretary. The betrayed employee. I had no idea Clark was doing anything illegal. I'm just his assistant. I scheduled meetings. Filed paperwork. That's all. The agents nodded. Took notes. Let her talk. But behind the scenes, digital forensics experts were analyzing everything. Email access patterns. Deleted files. The encrypted account. Within 48 hours, they knew. The anonymous tip had come from inside. And every piece of evidence pointed to Vicky Lewis. When they arrested her, Vicky's world collapsed. You're being charged with obstruction of justice and conspiracy, the agent said. Wait, Vicky protested. I reported a crime. I was trying to help. The federal prosecutor laid it out cold. You were an accomplice who got scared. Or more accurately, who got jealous. You implicated an innocent woman because your boss chose her over you. We have your emails. Your access logs. Your tip. You didn't report a crime. You committed one. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Vicky had tried to destroy Clark and Carmen. Instead, she'd destroyed herself. The charges kept coming. Clark was indicted for money laundering, conspiracy, racketeering. Vicky was charged with conspiracy, obstruction, accessory after the fact. But Carmen's nightmare had a different ending. Forensic accountants went through every transaction, every file, every access log, and they found nothing. Carmen had no involvement, no knowledge, no access to the illegal accounts. She was exactly what she appeared to be. An innocent woman who'd fallen in love with the wrong man. They released her after 3 days. But the damage was already done. Carmen walked out of the federal building into bright sunlight that hurt her eyes. She'd lost her job, her reputation, her sense of reality. Everything she thought she knew about Clark was a lie. Everything she thought she knew about her own judgment was destroyed. And the question that haunted her was simple and impossible. How did I not see it? Before Clark's formal arraignment, Carmen made a decision. Against her lawyer's advice, she went to see him. They sat across from each other in a sterile room with a guard watching. Carmen looked at the man she'd loved and saw a stranger. Was any of it real? She asked. Her voice was hollow, empty. Clark's eyes were honest. All of it was real. My feelings for you. Everything we had. That was real. But you lied to me every single day. I kept you separate, Clark said. I never wanted you involved. Carmen's laugh was bitter. You didn't give me a choice. You made me fall in love with a man who doesn't exist. I exist, Clark insisted. The man you know, that's me. The business is just what I did. No, Carmen said, standing. Who you are is what you do when no one's watching. And what you did was criminal. What you did was betray me every single day. Clark tried one more time. Vicky did this. She turned me in because she was jealous. She tried to destroy you. I know, Carmen said. And whose fault is that? You created this mess. You brought this into my life. You made me a victim of someone else's obsession because you couldn't be honest. I never meant for you to get hurt. Carmen looked at him one last time. But I did. And I can't forgive that. I loved you. I thought you were the man I'd been waiting for. But you're just another liar." She walked out. Didn't look back. Left Clark sitting alone with the ruins of what could have been. So here's the question that matters. When you build love on lies, who suffers most? The liar? The one who loved the liar? Or the one who loved them both and lost everything? Can someone rebuild their life after betrayal destroys everything they thought was real? The trials moved faster than anyone expected. Clark's lawyer negotiated a plea deal. 7 years in federal prison in exchange for full cooperation with the investigation. Clark took it. Stood in court, accepted responsibility, showed no emotion as the judge read his sentence. 7 years. He'd be 45 when he got out. Middle-aged. Marked. Forever labeled as a criminal. Vicky's trial was different. She tried to fight. Claimed she'd been coerced. Said she didn't understand the full scope of the operation. But the prosecution tore her defense apart piece by piece. They showed the jury her emails, her access logs, the timeline of her anonymous tip. And worst of all, they proved motive. Jealousy. Revenge. A woman scorned who tried to destroy the man she claimed to love and the innocent woman he'd chosen instead. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts. 6 years in federal prison. Clark and Vicky never saw each other again after sentencing. But before the trials ended, Clark's lawyer arranged one final meeting. Neutral ground. A coffee shop neither of them had been to before. They sat across from each other, two people who'd once trusted each other completely, now strangers bound only by mutual destruction. Clark spoke first. "Why did you do it?" Vicky's eyes were red from crying. "You really don't know. You were angry I didn't love you back. So you tried to destroy my life." Vicky's voice broke. "I protected you for years. I kept your secrets. I loved you when no one else did." "I never asked you to love me," Clark said quietly. "I never asked you to protect me." "You didn't have to ask," Vicky said. "I did it because I wanted to. Because I thought one day you'd see me. Really see me." Clark shook his head. "I did see you. As a colleague. As someone I trusted. But I can't manufacture feelings that aren't there." Vicky's anger flared one last time. "And I can't forgive you for choosing her. For choosing someone who didn't know you. Didn't protect you. Didn't sacrifice for you." "You didn't sacrifice for me," Clark said. "You sacrificed for a fantasy. And when reality didn't match what you wanted, you burned everything down. Including yourself." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Vicky stood up. "I hope she was worth it," she said. "I hope losing everything was worth a few months with someone who'll never trust you again." She walked away. Left Clark sitting alone with his coffee and his regrets. And that was the last time they ever spoke. But what about Carmen? What happens to the innocent person caught in someone else's war? Carmen's life imploded in ways that went beyond the interrogation room. She lost her job when Reynolds Consulting was shut down during the investigation. Her name appeared in news articles about the case. Not as a criminal, but as the girlfriend. The one who didn't know. And somehow that was almost worse. Background checks revealed her connection to Clark Reynolds every time she applied for a new job. Hiring managers would be interested until they Googled her name. Then the calls stopped coming. Her friends didn't know what to say to her. Her family worried constantly. And Carmen struggled with something deeper than unemployment or damaged reputation. She struggled with trust. How do you trust your own judgment when you were so completely wrong about someone? 6 months after the trial, Carmen had moved to a new city. Started over in a place where no one knew her story. She found work at a smaller company. Less glamorous. Lower pay. But honest work with honest people. She dated cautiously. Went to therapy twice a week. Worked on rebuilding the parts of herself that Clark's betrayal had broken. Her therapist asked her once, "Do you still love him?" Carmen thought about it for a long time. "I love who I thought he was," she finally said. "I'm grieving that person. But the Rayal Clark, I don't know if I ever knew him." 1 year after everything fell apart, letters started arriving. Prison letters from Clark. Common didn't open the first one, or the second, or the third. They sat in a drawer, unopened, while she tried to move forward. But eventually, curiosity won. She opened one. The handwriting was Clark's. Neat. Controlled. Common, it began. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But you deserved the truth, and I never gave it to you. I was a coward. I fell in love with you, and instead of choosing to be better, I chose to keep lying. That's on me. I hope you found peace. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. Common cried reading it. Cried for what could have been. For the man she'd loved who never really existed. For the time she'd lost and the innocence she'd never get back. Then she burned the letter. Watched it turn to ash, symbolically releasing him and everything he represented. Meanwhile, Vicky sat in prison writing in a journal that no one would ever read. I loved him so much it turned into hate, she wrote. I wanted to hurt him the way he hurt me. But in the end, I only hurt myself. Love shouldn't destroy. But mine did. She received no visitors, no letters, no contact with the outside world except her lawyer. She was completely alone with her choices and her regrets. And she would be for 6 more years. 2 years after the nightmare began, Common was different. Wiser. More cautious. But not broken. She volunteered at a community center on weekends. Rebuilt her career slowly and steadily. Made new friends who knew her story but didn't define her by it. And one Saturday afternoon, at a volunteer event, she met someone new. He was kind. Honest. Transparent about his life in ways that felt almost radical after Clark's deception. They talked for an hour. Laughed. Connected. He asked her to dinner. Common hesitated. The old fear rose up. What if she was wrong again? What if she couldn't trust her judgment? But then she thought about everything she'd survived. Everything she'd learned. And she realized something important. Clark's betrayal had taught her to be more careful. But it hadn't destroyed her ability to hope. Yes, she said. I'd like that. As she walked to her car later, Common caught her reflection in a window. She looked different now. Older. Wiser. Scarred but healing. She'd survived something that should have destroyed her. And she was choosing to believe in love again anyway. Not blindly. Not naively. But bravely. Because that's what survival looks like. Not the absence of scars, but the courage to keep living despite them. 3 lives that collided so destructively now running parallel. Never to meet again. Clark serving his time. Vicky drowning in bitterness. And Common choosing hope over fear. Because in the end, that's the only revenge that matters. Living well. Living honestly. And refusing to let someone else's betrayal define your future. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever trusted someone completely only to discover they weren't who you thought? Drop your story in the comments. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes knowing you're not alone is the first step toward healing.